Night in Rome has always carried an uncanny stillness. Even as the bells toll from the ancient towers of its churches, something feels hollow. As if their chime isn't calling souls toward the light, but rather signaling the opening of a different gate, one that leads into a realm few dare to enter, the embrace of darkness. On June 29, 1963, at the very heart of Vatican power, an event occurred, or perhaps never did, and yet, its shadow continues to haunt truth-seekers 6 decades later. A secret ritual. A summons extended to the very one cast into the deepest pit. A night some now refer to as the enthronement of Lucifer. There are no official records. No bulletins. But there are whispers, carried by those who once walked in the shadow of the papal throne. Voices like that of former Jesuit priest Malachi Martin, who claimed that at the stroke of midnight, within a hidden chapel deep inside the Vatican, a group of high-ranking clergy conducted a dark rite, one that invited the Prince of Darkness to ascend the sacred throne once reserved for God. Is this merely a modern myth? A spiritual melodrama, scripted by the hands of disillusionment? Or, could it be the first domino in a long, covert sequence of events, a sequence that gradually transformed the Vatican from a citadel of divine worship, into a fortress of shadows? We won't rush to answer. For if the truth truly exists, it is not resting on the surface, but buried deep beneath layers of dust, centuries-old silence, rituals, and symbology. And often, it is silence itself that becomes the most terrifying confession. Part 1, A Night Never Recorded. History, we're told, is written by the victors. But sometimes, what is not written down, holds the most terrifying truths. On June 29, 1963, Pope Paul VI was officially enthroned at the Vatican. The coronation unfolded before thousands of faithful, under sacred light, choral hymns, and holy symbols. It was broadcast live. Covered by global media. A moment permanently etched into the modern timeline of the Catholic Church. But on that very same day, within the same Vatican walls, according to several unofficial sources, a second ceremony took place. No lights. No cameras. Only candle flames, shadows, and blood-bound oaths. The first to speak of it was former Jesuit priest Malachi Martin. In his 1996 novel Windswept House, he described a satanic ritual held inside the chapel of St. Paul, deep within the Vatican. Clergy robed in scarlet. Chants in Latin, not in praise of God, but as invocations for another entity. Inverted symbols, upside-down crosses, veiled lights. At first, the world dismissed it as fiction. But Martin later declared, the book was 85% truth. The characters were real. The events were real. Only the names had been changed, for safety. So the real question isn't, did the ritual really happen? But rather, why would a man who once served at the Church's highest levels dare to reveal this? Martin was no outsider. He had worked as an assistant during Vatican II, one of the Church's most revolutionary councils. He had access to classified archives, served as a theological advisor, and translated ancient documents for Pope Pius XII. And then, he left the Church. Without explanation. He wrote books instead. In the final years of his life, he stopped dodging the question. Yes, he said. There was an enthronement of Lucifer. It happened at night, in a small chapel, conducted by members of the clergy themselves. And from that moment, everything began to change. At that point, the story crossed the boundary between myth and testimony. Independent researchers later claimed that, according to Martin, the Vatican ritual was mirrored simultaneously by a black mass in Charleston, South Carolina, a coordinated act meant to reflect and amplify the ritual in Rome. Two ends of the world. One moment in time. One purpose, to empower the adversary. Was this all coincidence? An elaborate tale to sell books? Or, the first trace of something that has since spread silently for decades? From 1963 onward, strange things began to unfold. Controversial reforms during Vatican II. Deep divisions among bishops. Scandals unprecedented in scope. And in 1972, Pope Paul VI himself made a chilling declaration. The smoke of Satan has entered the Church of God. He never explained where that smoke came from. But if Martin's story was true, it began on the very night of his own coronation. The Vatican has recorded thousands of ceremonies, consecrations, blessings, elevations to sainthood. But one night was never documented. No images. No transcripts. Only faint clues buried in a book labeled as fiction. And real consequences echoing to this day. We may never find definitive proof. But perhaps truth doesn't require proof. Only the courage to ask the right questions. If such a ritual truly took place, then it was not merely a betrayal of faith. It would mark the greatest spiritual coup in modern history. And we, the faithful, would be nothing more than sheep, led astray without even knowing it. Part 2, The Smoke of Satan, a Whistleblower from Within. June 29, 1963, if a secret ritual truly took place that night, then its cost was not just a fleeting act of heresy. It may have been a quiet fracture in the foundation of faith, a rupture that would echo through the Church for centuries to come. 9 years later, in 1972, the very man who had been entrusted with leading the Catholic Church as the Vicar of Christ on earth, Pope Paul VI, made a statement that remains one of the most haunting ever spoken from the throne of St. Peter. From some fissure, no, not just a mystery, from a real fissure, the smoke of Satan has entered the Church of God. These were not the words of a heretic. Not a critic from outside the walls. But the Pope himself, the spiritual head of over 1 billion souls. But what was the smoke of Satan? Was it a metaphor? A literary flourish for discontent? Or was it a cry for help from the very heart of the Church? In that speech, Paul VI continued with unsettling clarity. A confusion in theological thought. A destabilization within the Church. Conflicts, divisions, and the collapse of faith. He wasn't just suggesting that something had gone wrong. He named it directly: Satan had entered. It is rare, almost unheard of, for a pope to invoke Satan's name in such a context, especially regarding internal church matters. His words sent a jolt through the religious world, and yet, they quickly faded from public conversation. Why? Was he referencing the Second Vatican Council, the sweeping reform movement launched just a few years earlier? This council had made radical changes. Replacing Latin with vernacular languages in the Mass. Opening the Church to modern society. Relaxing strict doctrines and rituals. To many, Vatican II was progress. To others, especially traditionalists, it was not just an opening to the world, but an opening to darkness. If the Church is a ship, Vatican II turned the rudder. But the real question is, who was holding the wheel? Ignored warnings from within. It wasn't just Pope Paul VI. Before and after him, several voices from within the Church issued eerily aligned warnings. Pope Leo XIII, in the late 1800s, was said to have witnessed a terrifying vision during Mass, Satan asking for 100 years to destroy the Church, and being granted it. Cardinal Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict XVI, once lamented, "The Church is full of filth, even within." Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano, former Vatican ambassador to the U.S., accused a hidden faction of the Church of collaborating with secular power to betray the faith. These voices didn't come from critics or conspiracy theorists. They came from inside the white walls of the Vatican itself. And all of them, in different ways, said the same thing. Something else had entered the ranks of the priesthood. Smoke, not fire, but the sign of it. Smoke, by its nature, is not the flame. But it always comes from fire. It's the warning, something is burning, quietly, somewhere you can't quite see. And perhaps, the smoke of Satan was how Pope Paul VI named what he saw, but could not fully reveal. Maybe it was fear. Maybe he was prevented. Or maybe, the forces at play had grown too vast for any one man to stop. Because once a door has been opened, even by a hairline crack, how do you stop what's been waiting outside for so long? What was never answered? Why was there no official investigation after the Pope's declaration? Why has the Vatican remained silent on the phrase, "smoke of Satan," to this day? And if there was truly a fissure, who created it? Perhaps the 1963 ritual was a myth. Perhaps it never occurred. But the Pope's declaration, that was real. And it has never been fully explained. So if a Pope truly believed that Satan had infiltrated the Church, then we must ask ourselves the question no one dares to ask. What did he see? And why, after all these years, are we still not allowed to know? Part 3, The Prophecy of Malachi, the Last Pope. Sometimes, warnings do not come from the present. They echo from a past so distant, so buried, that we mistake them for legend. In the year 1139, an Irish archbishop named Saint Malachi is said to have received a startling vision during a pilgrimage to Rome. In that vision, he did not see names or faces, but instead 112 cryptic Latin phrases, each representing a future pope, from his time all the way to the end of the world. No one knows why the list was hidden, but it was allegedly stored within Vatican walls for over 400 years. In 1595, the prophecy resurfaced, and from that point forward, the world began watching each newly elected pope like the turning of the final pages of an ancient book. The chilling coincidences. Pope John Paul II was linked to the phrase, de labor solis, from the labor of the sun. He was born during a solar eclipse. He died during another. Pope Benedict XVI was paired with Gloria Olivi, the glory of the olive. The Benedictine order, from which his papal name is derived, bears the olive branch as its symbol. And now, we've reached the final phrase. No more poetic riddles. No short descriptors. Just one full, ominous sentence. In the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church, Peter the Roman will reign, feeding the flock through many tribulations. After this, the city of 7 hills shall be destroyed. And the dreadful judge shall judge his people. Rome, the city of 7 hills. The metaphor is unmistakable. Rome, often referred to as the city of 7 hills, is the eternal seat of the Catholic Church, and the center of the Vatican. So what is the prophecy truly saying? There will be a final pope. A time of intense persecution. The fall of the Vatican. And ultimately, the final judgment. Pope Francis, is he the last? Pope Francis, the current pontiff, is the 266th pope in official records, and the 112th since Saint Malachi's vision. Many believe he is the one prophesied as Peter the Roman. He did not take the name Peter, but he chose Francis, honoring Saint Francis of Assisi, whose father was named Pietro, Peter. His parents were of Italian, Roman, origin. Though he is the first pope from the Americas, he is also the first to depart dramatically from the traditional mold of the Vatican hierarchy. Is this just creative interpretation? Or is it a carefully chosen identity, designed not to awaken the final prophecy by name? If he is not Peter the Roman, then who is? Some theologians speculate that Francis is the penultimate, and that his successor will bear the name, either literally or symbolically. And when that day comes, the final phase will begin. Whether or not you believe in Malachi's prophecy, one fact cannot be ignored. The world is losing faith in the very symbols it once revered. Scandals. Doctrinal division. A rising wave of church abandonment in countries that once formed the heart of global Catholicism. So perhaps the end of the list isn't just the end of names, but the end of Vatican's spiritual influence over humankind. And if that's true, what will take its place? A new pope? A new system? Or a deceiver, cloaked in robes of faith, yet serving something else entirely? Because when light fades, darkness doesn't need to conquer. It only needs to quietly take its place. Part 4, the deep church and the deep state. We've explored the secret ritual said to have taken place in 1963. We've heard a pope's chilling warning about the smoke of Satan. We've unraveled a prophecy predicting the final pope and the fall of Rome. But what if all of that was only the surface? What if the ritual wasn't the endgame, but merely the opening act of something far more calculated? A long, quiet infiltration. A hidden power embedding itself within the very core of the church. A force operating from the shadows. We're all familiar with the term deep state. A shadow network said to operate behind democratically elected governments, controlling policy through secret alliances between intelligence agencies, financial powerhouses, and private interests. But few dare to imagine the spiritual counterpart. A deep church. The first to publicly name this phenomenon was Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano, former apostolic nuncio to the United States. A man who once walked the highest halls of Vatican diplomacy. In a series of open letters released in 2020, Vigano made a bold and unsettling claim. A parallel church is operating inside the true church. A small but powerful elite, collaborating with secular forces. To undermine the faith and reshape religion to serve a new global order. Not invisible, just undiscussed. The deep church doesn't wear horns. It doesn't raise swords. It doesn't announce itself. Instead, it controls Vatican finances behind the scenes. Influences the election of popes. Infiltrates seminaries to shape future priests in modernist ideology. Most dangerously, it redefines faith into a godless humanitarianism. It doesn't tear down the altar. It replaces the altar's occupant. Signs the world chose to ignore. The P2 scandal, a Masonic lodge known as Propaganda Do, was exposed infiltrating Vatican banking in the 1980s. The mysterious death of Pope John Paul I, just 33 days into his papacy. Many believe he died because he planned to purge the church of a corrupt financial and clerical network. The sudden resignation of Pope Benedict XVI, the first pope in 600 years to willingly abdicate, amid escalating scandals and internal opposition. And then, Pope Francis emerged. A transfer of power, or something else? Is Pope Francis a representative of the deep church? That question divides even the most devout believers. Some see in him a beacon of mercy, a humble shepherd of the poor. Others see a pope who dilutes absolute doctrine. A pontiff who once declared, "The diversity of religions is willed by God." A phrase that left many in silent alarm. A man who allowed pagan symbols like the Pachamama idol to appear during Vatican ceremonies in 2019, an act that triggered outcry from cardinals who accused him of bringing false gods into the temple. The deep church does not seek to destroy the church. It seeks to control it. It does not burn scriptures. It redefines them. It doesn't demolish the sanctuary. It erodes the meaning of sin, reshapes truth into opinion, and slowly removes the need for spiritual discernment. When no one believes in absolute good or evil, in truth or lies, in light or darkness, Satan doesn't need to appear. Silence is enough. Deep church and deep state, two halves of the same machine. Many researchers argue that these forces are not separate. The deep state manipulates politics, economics, and technology. The deep church manipulates morality, faith, and the human soul. Together, they do not merely control behavior. They redefine what it means to be human. Some conspiracy theories go further, suggesting the Vatican is not just a religious center, but a spiritual hub in a global network of financial elites, occult fraternities, and technocratic NGOs, working together toward a new world order. The question this chapter asks: if the deep church truly exists, and if it now controls the heart of the Vatican, then who are we really following? A religion that no longer holds the light of faith, but merely retains ritual, authority, and prestige. Is that still a church? Or has it become a performance by Satan, wearing sacred robes? Part 5, Strange Deaths and Silenced Voices. There is a quiet but persistent law in human history. Whenever someone comes too close to the truth, they either disappear or are labeled insane. Since the early 20th century, a long list of such individuals has emerged around the Vatican. Popes, priests, journalists, even bankers, who died suddenly, vanished mysteriously, or were reduced to ridicule. We are taught that religion is a place of sacrifice. But sometimes, that sacrifice doesn't come from faith, it comes from confronting power. The Pope who lived only 33 days, John Paul I. In 1978, after the death of Pope Paul VI, Cardinal Albino Luciani, known for his humility and simplicity, was elected Pope, taking the name John Paul I. He disliked pomp. He refused to wear the papal tiara. He spoke openly about reforming the Vatican Bank and removing bishops suspected of ties to Freemasonry. And then, 33 days later, he was dead. No autopsy. No formal investigation. Just a tired phrase repeated again and again, he died of a heart attack. But why was his body discovered by a nun, against Vatican protocol? Why was the full medical report never released? And why, just days earlier, did he tell his secretary, "I must clean up the church"? The Bank of God, or someone else's? Running parallel to John Paul I's death was a deepening financial labyrinth known as the Vatican Bank. In 1982, Roberto Calvi, chairman of Banco Ambrosiano, was found hanged beneath Blackfriars Bridge in London. His pockets were filled with bricks. Calvi was once dubbed God's banker, and had known connections to the Vatican and a secretive Masonic lodge, P2, Propaganda Do. His death was initially ruled a suicide. Later, it was officially declared murder. So who killed him? And why? A 2003 investigation by The Guardian connected Calvi to the Italian Mafia, the P2 Masonic Lodge, and powerful insiders within the Vatican. P2, when the Church and Freemasonry joined hands. Propaganda Do was declared illegal by the Italian government in 1981. Documents seized from their headquarters included names of high-ranking figures, politicians, military generals, media executives, and even an archbishop managing Vatican finances. The terrifying part wasn't just their presence. It was that they shared a goal: to rebirth Italy into a new order. If the secret lodge had already infiltrated finance, media, and the military, is it hard to believe they would also target the Vatican, a body with global influence and immunity from secular law? Warnings that were buried. David Yallop, an investigative journalist, published In God's Name, alleging Pope John Paul I was poisoned. Malachi Martin, a Jesuit priest, claimed the 1963 enthronement of Lucifer in the Vatican was real. Archbishop Vigano directly accused the Deep Church of manipulating Vatican leadership. All three were removed from the system. One was mocked. One died in isolation. One lives in exile. You might say it's all fiction. But ask yourself, why is it that those who warn about darkness are always the ones pushed into it? Every death, a warning. Since 1963, the Vatican has seen a pope who died under suspicious circumstances, a global financial scandal with links to Freemasonry, hundreds of sexual abuse cases covered up for decades, and the first pope in 600 years to resign from the throne. Each of these events is documented, but never have they been connected as part of a larger pattern. Yet if you try, not with naivete, but with the intuition of someone seeking truth, you may begin to see a disturbing shape forming behind the veil. Something hidden. Something patient. Something that does not fear crosses or candles, because it has already stepped into the sanctuary, dressed not as an enemy, but as a guardian of the faith. Part 6, The Woman in Purple on the Scarlet Beast. There are passages in the Bible, no matter how many times they're read, that still chill the spine as if heard for the first time. Not because they are hard to understand, but because they feel dangerously close to reality. In the book of Revelation, chapter 17, St. John describes a vision, surreal, symbolic, almost prophetic. I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, precious stones, and pearls. In her hand was a golden cup filled with abominations and the filth of her fornication. And on her forehead was written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. Revelation 17. A symbol, or a coded truth. Many modern theologians interpret the woman in purple as a layered metaphor. A critique of institutional religion when it becomes a tool of desire, power, and control. But since the Middle Ages, another interpretation has persisted, one that remains controversial to this day. The woman riding the scarlet beast is a prophetic image of the Roman Catholic Church itself. Let's take a closer look. Clothed in purple and scarlet, the official liturgical colors worn by Vatican cardinals and bishops. Holding a golden cup, echoes the Eucharistic chalice used in every Mass. Riding a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns, the beast, a symbol of global political might, aligned with worldly power. The city on 7 hills, a historic epithet for Rome, home of the Vatican. At first glance, these may seem like coincidences. But when placed on a symbolic map, a darker question emerges. Are these just literary parallels? Or a warning encrypted 2,000 years ago? Babylon the Great, a new Rome? In the Jewish consciousness of Jesus' time, Babylon was not just a past empire that conquered Jerusalem. It was a lasting symbol of corrupted power, religious coercion, and the spiritual enslavement of humanity. If ancient Babylon was a den of false gods and pagan rituals, then could the New Babylon be a place that still appears to worship, but has lost the true spirit of God? And if that is true, then the woman in purple is no longer a distant figure from apocalyptic scripture. She is seated among us. By candlelight, under gold-leafed domes, behind stained glass windows. A church, or a system of power. If a religious institution prioritizes political interests over truth, covers up crimes instead of confessing them, fears losing influence more than losing the souls of its people, then has it remained a church, or become a structure dressed in holiness, serving something else entirely? And if the beast beneath her represents worldly power, then perhaps the woman in purple symbolizes a faith betrayed, traded for global reach and dominance. A prophecy in motion. The fate of this woman in Revelation is not a gentle one. The beast will hate her, strip her naked, consume her flesh, and burn her with fire. Revelation 17-16. If this prophecy is unfolding, then the fall of a massive religious system will not come from outside, but from within. When it becomes so far gone, it can no longer be saved. And if the Vatican is the woman, then perhaps judgment has already begun. Not by sword or flame, but through the quiet awakening of millions, who no longer bow blindly, but ask, what spirit truly reigns behind the altar? Part 7, The Inner Connection, the True Source of Light. We have come a long way. From secret chapels buried within the Vatican, to ancient prophecies whispered through time. From coded symbols in Revelation, to unexplained deaths and silenced clergy. We've uncovered a side of religion that is not a sanctuary of peace, but a battlefield of spiritual power. Not everything is darkness, but clearly, not everything is pure. And while the world continues to orbit around ritual, vestments, hierarchy, and titles, there is one place, unnoticed by most, that waits in silence for you to return. That place is your own heart. When the true light is no longer on the altar. If the ritual has lost its sanctity. If the sermon no longer echoes truth. If the keeper of heaven's keys has lost loyalty to the light. Then what are you to do? Will you abandon your faith? Or will you seek a deeper kind of faith, one that is no longer contaminated by human agendas? The kingdom of God is within you. Luke 17-21. This is not poetic metaphor. It's a forgotten command. When did we begin kneeling before hands adorned with golden rings? Instead of lifting our gaze to the God that speaks within the chambers of our own conscience. When did salvation become a currency of ritual, fees, and bureaucracy? Your soul does not belong to the Vatican. You do not need to stand beneath a gilded dome to be loved. You do not need the blessing of a man to be forgiven. You need only a moment of silence. A single honest breath. And a whisper from within. I am seeking the light. Not the light framed on a wall. But the light I was born with. The true light cannot be attacked. Yes, you can be manipulated by words. You can be misled by images, rituals, and titles. But if you learn to listen to your own soul, you will know. What is real? What is counterfeit? What is love? And what is manipulation cloaked in holiness? True light does not demand your belief. It only asks that you remember. When you return inward, you break the chains. Perhaps the Vatican hides something you cannot yet verify. Perhaps the next pope will shake the world's faith to its core. Perhaps the prophecies were right, or perhaps they were misunderstood. But in all cases, your soul remains the one place that no power can touch. Unless you hand them the key. Above all else, guard your heart. For it is the wellspring of life. Proverbs 4-23. The final choice doesn't belong to the Vatican. It belongs to you. You can continue living in fear. That the world is being controlled by a shadowed conspiracy. Or you can choose to light a small fire within yourself. And let that light spread. You don't need to declare war on darkness. You simply need to refuse to bow to it. We have crossed into forbidden territory together. We've followed the trail of a night no one dares to speak of. We've heard echoes of confessions, prophecies, and fracture lines hidden deep within one of the most powerful institutions on earth, the Vatican. But in the end, the question isn't whether the ritual actually happened. It isn't whether Lucifer was enthroned, or if it's just a dark legend. It isn't even about who in the Vatican is pulling which strings. The real question is simpler, and far more profound. Who is controlling the destiny of your soul? When you don't choose, someone else will. If you hand over your soul to the system, it will teach you how to believe, without ever allowing you to ask. It will show you how to pray, without understanding what you're praying for. It will teach you to fear hell, but never let you touch heaven. But if you guard your soul as a sacred ground no one has the right to invade, then no pope, no secret order, no black rite can ever reach you. Truth doesn't need permission, only remembrance. Maybe what you've just heard makes you skeptical. Maybe you want to reject it outright. Or maybe, just maybe, something inside you feels true. Even if you can't explain why. That is the signal. Because the soul doesn't speak in language. It whispers. And you, if you become quiet enough, will hear it. The final question is not for the church. It's for you. When you face darkness in your own life, do you turn away and look for a priest to intercede? Or are you brave enough to walk into that darkness with the light that is already inside you? What they fear most is not that you'll learn the truth. It's that you'll remember you are the one holding the key. The key is not stored in some secret Vatican archive. It's not hidden in forbidden texts. It doesn't belong to any organization. It has always been within you. In your free will. In your power to choose. In your ability to remember. We come from the light. And we were never meant to bow before the darkness. So if you ask, who controls the destiny of my soul? Then the answer, the final revelation of this journey, is this. Only when you refuse to choose, does someone else choose for you. Only when you forget where you came from can they build a false world to keep you in chains. But if you remember, then no ritual, no throne, no shadow can ever bind you again.